has written and illustrated books for all ages. She also makes relief block prints and writes short stories and poems celebrating the wonders of the world, both real and imaginary. She lives near Boston with the usual sorts of family and pets, including a pampered Venus flytrap. For Strong Women's Strange Worlds, she puts together author panels, makes graphics, runs the slides during events, maintains the website, and really just does a lot for us. I added that part in for you. Whenever you're ready, Anne.
Thank you very much. Well, I'm going to be reading from a high fantasy, so just trying to complete that little sum of everything that we try to provide you in our panels. When at last Svarnil stopped to rest, all was silent behind her except for the chirp of birds and the rustling of squirrels. The bandits must have given up on her. It did not occur to Svarnil to wonder why they had turned back from the chase so abruptly. She looked up through the leaf canopy until she found a break in the dappled greenery where she could see the sun to get her bearing. The sun was almost directly overhead. She also saw something which looked more promising. Farther ahead, a thin plume of white smoke dispersed lazily in the air. Svarnil made toward it at a brisk march. She thought, although she gave little enough thought to the matter, that the smoke must come from the hut of one of the harmless wood dwellers Polgudzi had mentioned. Since she was heading south, it must be the house of Ro and her daughters. Somehow the conviction that she would find Ro and her daughters ahead prevented Svarnil from wondering whether the smoke might just as well come from the camp of another band of robbers, or indeed from something worse. Believing only that finding the source of the smoke would allow her to rest and get directions, Svarnil hurried on, ever deeper into the ringwood, where the bandits were afraid to follow. Astiath had not found the dragon in the first place she looked, so she slept that night in the empty cave, and in the morning bent her power on discovering the location of the beast. Her locating spell pointed to the center of the ringwood, where the lords of the ringwood had held their court, and Astiath set out steadily through the forest to the site of the ancient palace. To watch one of the Kumaroon at any given moment, there would not seem to be anything unusual about their walking, yet somehow they cover distances more quickly than mortals. Somehow they find paths through obstacles. It is said that they walk as the crow flies, and more is meant by the phrase than simply the direction they take. In short, Astiath, having traveled somewhat farther through the ringwood than Svarnil, reached the southwest side of the central clearing just after the elf reached its northern side. Stepping out of the forest onto a slate-paved avenue, Astiath stopped still as one of the broken marble pillars bordering the trees. She felt a tingling of power in the air, a pulse of dry heat washing out of the crumble of palace before her. She knew the feeling to be the presence of a dragon, and a dragon aroused. She ran toward the cluster of broken buildings, sweeping in her urgency like the shadow of a wind-driven cloud. A sudden crackle of golden flame leapt up from a courtyard in front of her. The hard, bright sparks pricked the air, and white smoke mushroomed angrily above the jagged edge of wall. Svarnil came abruptly between the last trees, and her next step carried her between two marble pillars, one of them fallen on its side. The slate pavement felt strangely jarring under her feet, so long accustomed to a thick cushion of fallen leaves. Before her rose a cluster of elegant stone buildings, their high windows hanging empty beneath half-fallen roofs. Behind the block of ancient stonework rose the thread of white smoke. As she watched, a sharp puff knotted the thread, and at the same time, Svarnil felt as though she were being watched, as though a mind were searching for her, focusing on her. Without thinking at all now of whether the smoke came from the fire of woodsmen or bandits, Svarnil walked forward to find its source. The lord of the ringwood and all his court were long gone from their palace. That much was clear. Weeds stood in the cracks of the stone pavement. Ivy curtained the walls, veiling some of the gaps that grew there as the ancient blocks fell away from their places. Windows opened onto the blue sky or onto black, empty spaces where slate roofs still held out the sun. The sun was hot, Svarnil suddenly realized, and although it was overhead, it beat on her face, pulsing on her cheeks until she felt them flushing to her heartbeat. Even when she walked under archways where ferns curled out of the joints and moss hid in the corners, the dry heat beat on her, and the smooth, worn walls were dry and warm to her fingertips. As she reached inner courtyards, a few of the windows held leaded diamonds of glass in their corners, while in others the lead alone remained, twisted and drooping. A gray thrush, the color of the slate still left on the turrets, fluttered onto a broken stub of railing where a balcony had been, and began its long, liquid song. Over all the abandoned palace moved the watchful consciousness, and Svarnil felt it staring into her mind, probing at her motives for entering the ringwood. But her only motive was to find the fire from which rose the smoke, and as she looked up again, she saw that it was nearly overhead, spinning up less lazily from just the other side of the three-story palace wing she faced. She stepped into the archway. At that moment, many things happened at once, and all of them in a flick of time so brief that anyone watching from a distance might have missed it while blinking. But for Svarnil, time crouched motionless as a stalking wildcat, while a crackling sheet of yellow flame smashed against the wall just above the arch, and the sharp, bright sparks shot brittle as shattered glass off the blackened stone and pricked Svarnil's forearms, thrown up to shield her face. The billowing smoke was snorted aside to reveal the dragon. Nothing Svarnil had ever seen, no legend she had ever learned prepared her for the awesome size and power of such a creature, muscled in iron, mailed in gold, and impossibly huge. Heat radiated from the dragon's body, and light flashed from the shifting scales as the monster breathed. It was like standing before the sun itself, facing that golden, glowing warmth. The long head rose, and Svarnil remembered just too late that she must not look the dragon in the eyes. They were on her before she could turn away. She was pinned down by the three-cornered eyes, their shimmering golden sheen confusing inconceivable depths. Then the interrupted song of the thrush flowed on, and somehow the resumption of the passage of time only underscored the precarious tension of the meeting. It was a reminder that her fate still marched inexorably to meet her. The fire did not have to strike above the arch, thought Svarnil, lowering her arms, which were no shield against the dragon's piercing gaze. She was caught in that gaze, mesmerized by the shaded depths swimming below the golden sheen. Staring into the dragon's eyes was like looking down from a mountain peak with an eagle's vision, glimpsing distant details beneath shifting wisps of aureate cloud. She sank without struggle into the shimmering depths. And I'll stop there.